Hi Vegetalian! So I've changed my name to Vegetalian Katie. You might have noticed, you might not have. Basically it's just so that I can go down different lanes instead of just being like focused on food. I still want to do food recipes and food videos because I love it, it's a great passion of mine, but I also want to talk about important things like mental health and just fun things like makeup and fashion. So basically what's inspired this is I watched one of the crude vegan videos. She's amazing, she's like a feminist, she talks about all the things that people don't normally talk about on YouTube and on Facebook and Instagram. It's fantastic. You should really go check her out. But recently she released a video. It was basically lots of different people sent her videos and all about their invisible illnesses, and they basically spoke about their personal experience with it. It's an hour long and it is just incredible. It made me cry. There are so many amazing stories on there and all the people on there are incredible for sharing that so publicly. It's just brilliant. So I'm going to link that below just so that you go and watch it because it's awesome. So basically I have a few invisible illnesses, so I thought I would talk about them. I have BPD and I have fibromyalgia. I also have anxiety and depression, but they kind of fall under the BPD, fibro. They kind of all blend together for me, so it's hard to kind of pinpoint what affects what and stuff. So we're going to try and pull that apart later. But first of all, I'm going to explain what BPD is, and then I'm going to explain what fibro is, and then we'll sort of talk about how it all works together. So BPD stands for borderline personality disorder. Some people get it confused with bipolar disorder because obviously BPD, it sounds quite similar, and it's also mood disorder, so they're very similar in ways, but borderline personality disorder is sort of over shorter periods of time, whereas bipolar is over long periods of time. So that's kind of how they decipher which one you have. They're kind of similar, but they do often get confused, so just put bipolar to the side for today. We're just going to talk about BPD, so borderline personality disorder. So I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder about, I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago, so quite recent in my eyes because I've had this my entire teenage adult life. That's pretty recent for me. Anyway, so the characteristics of, or the traits of BPD, there are quite a few, and you have to have a certain amount to be considered to have BPD. So I'm going to find my laptop and find the characteristics for you, so I'm not just like making them up as I go along. So I found a website, I think it's called helpguide.org, articles, mental disorder, borderline personality disorder. So I'm just going to read, there are 9 symptoms of BPD on this website. I'm not sure if that's all of them completely or whether they can differ from person to person or whatever, but yeah, I'm no professional, please don't think I am. It's pretty obvious I'm not. But anyway, number 1, fear of abandonment. Number 2, unstable relationships. Number 3, unclear or shifting self-image. Number 4, impulsive destructive behaviours. Number 5, self-harm. Number 6, extreme emotional swings. Number 7, chronic feelings of emptiness. Number 8, explosive anger. Number 9, feeling suspicious or out of touch with reality. So it doesn't sound very nice the way they've put it. It's not very nice sometimes, but once you get it under control, you can kind of lead a normal life. It can get better. I'm currently in therapy. I would say I'm a very stable person for someone with BPD. There are a lot of people out there that might have BPD and might be okay sometimes and then really go off the handle or whatever. But yeah, basically my experience with BPD is I always felt quite strange. As a kid, I always felt like I didn't really understand people around me. My identity has been something that I have experimented with for years. I never really understood why. I thought I was just kind of experimenting with style and stuff, which I think partly I was, but partly it's the trying to find that part of you that you don't feel like you have. They say chronic emptiness, which I really don't like. but it is kind of, I don't really relate to that, but I do understand what they're saying. So people try to fill that hole with, illegal substances, sex, friendships, alcohol, a lot of people do that, but not everyone with BPD. So this is the issue, is BPD in film, in media, has such a bad kind of rep behind it, but so many of the people that I know with BPD are like the most genuine, lovely people I've ever met, because the nice sides of BPD that people don't talk about are you're very emotionally available because you're so open and you love talking about feelings, you love, being around people, you're very loyal. Well, I am extremely loyal. I can't speak for everyone. Because your emotions are so strong, when you really, really love someone, it's like real intense love. But it also goes the other way. So if you don't like someone, it's horrible because you hate them, and it's sometimes there's no balance between the two. So the fear of abandonment is something that you can sort with therapy. I don't think I have that anymore. It can come from, a lot of BPD, or a lot of the people that have got BPD, it's come from a past trauma, whether that be something really, really awful, or it could be something like, a situational thing that's left you scarred, that isn't necessarily that big of a deal to other people, but maybe to you it is. So, it can do it at different levels, it can affect you. So, unstable relationships. So that's one of the things I really relate to, because I really, really struggle to keep friendships and to keep, because you're always shifting from emotional to pretty chilled out to I love this song, I hate this song. It is really difficult to keep friends, because sometimes you even think do I like these people, or is that just me today? So you have this shifting consciousness. No, that's not the right word. It's this shifting between personalities. It's not split personality disorder, so I won't click and turn into another person like in DID. That's not the same thing, but I do feel different. So my emotions can go from I'm a really happy, chilled out person, I love certain music, I love drawing, I love doing food, making food, talking to friends, and then it can switch and I can kind of feel like I want to be on my own all the time. I don't really like people, so that makes it incredibly hard to maintain friendships, because people like stability in their lives, and people like knowing where they stand with people. And unfortunately, people with BPD, it's a bit difficult sometimes to understand what they mean unless you know them really, really well, and you know that it's just a mood and it will pass, and they don't actually mean, if they say anything mean, they don't mean that. It must be incredibly hard on the other side. So unclear or shifting self-image. So the shifting self-image, mine has stopped now, and I feel like I've got this very steady understanding of my self-image and who I am, and all of that kind of evened out at the age of about 22, after I'd done all my soul searching, trying to hang out with different groups of people and try different makeup and try different music and all of that. So I think for me it was more of an experimental phase, whereas some people really, really struggle with this up until late adulthood and really struggle to find a sense of self. And I think that's why a lot of people with BPD are very opinionated, because when you find something you're really, really I'm a vegan, so I'm extremely passionate about it, because in my head that's a very moral black and white thing. So for me that's a really stable thing to hold on to, because no matter what place I am in my head, I know in my brain that I don't agree with people eating animals, or the environmental damage. So for me that is a very stable black and white thought. So that's, I think, one of the reasons why we're quite opinionated, or can be, you know, everyone is different. And the thing is, you have to have, I think it's 7 traits, and this is 9, so you have to have like a majority of the traits to be considered to have BPD. And some people will not be angry at all, they'll be really chilled, really quiet, maybe really struggle with emotions and struggle to get that out. They might be more inward and, you know, not actually show the classic signs of someone with BPD. So impulsive self-destructive behaviours is the next one. This is really horrible, and I do think that this can translate in so many ways. Like I've struggled with food, like how much to eat and how little to eat, driving too fast when I had a bike, you know, things, stupid things that you shouldn't do, but when you have BPD you do have really impulsive thoughts and behaviours, and unless you get therapy and sort of calm that down, that can be really destructive for friendships, for your life and your sense of self as well. But it can lead people to get into wrong friendships, be manipulated, you know, and also you could be quite destructive towards other people. So if you're someone that has the explosive anger traits, that hand in hand does not work. So say you know, destructive behaviour is drinking, and then you know, go out and you fight someone, that's not that's not good. So yeah. So they've said that it's sensation seeking behaviour, which makes sense, because if you've got that chronic feeling of emptiness, you're trying to get that feeling back, and I think being excited gets that emotion back in you. You know, if you've been feeling a little bit numb, or if you've gone through a phase of depression with your BPD, you kind of want anything to give you a little bit of life back, and that can be negative choices for some people. So they could pick drugs or drinking or sex, with, you know, which is fine, the sex part, I mean, not the drugs or drinking, if you have a control over it. But if you're doing it for that reason, then you should really talk to a therapist and try and work through that. The self-harm, suicidal behaviour, deliberate self-harm, this is really horrible. Like I hate this kind of side of things. I know people with BPD that really struggle with self-harm, and it is horrible. And like, I don't think I've ever struggled with self-harm. 1, because I'm absolutely terrified of blood, so I don't think I would ever go there, and 2, in my brain, self-harm has never made any sense to me. I think I'm quite a black and white thinker, and I just think that wouldn't make any sense for me, because people would have noticed that I was struggling, and one of the worst things in my brain when I was younger was that people would know that I was unwell. So for me, I never went there, but I know plenty of people that have. I know people that have tried to commit suicide, and it's awful, and that is the side of BPD that is really scary, because you can see someone that is incredibly happy one day. This is why they're invisible illnesses, because you don't really know what's going on in people's heads. Like, you can see someone extremely happy 1 minute, and then they can go really suicidal the next, and it's very extreme and scary. And if it's scary and extreme for the people around them, you can only imagine what it's like for the actual person experiencing those emotions and those feelings. So it's just something to keep, you know, in your mind if you know someone with BPD, that it can go both ways, and you just have to be really careful, and maybe talk with them about how they would tell you if they were struggling with anything like that. But the suicidal behaviour one is really tricky to deal with, because a lot of people, when you mention suicide, or when people say they're suicidal, they think it's attention seeking behaviour. But the thing with BPD is that when you're feeling an emotion, you are wholeheartedly feeling that emotion. So if someone's saying that they feel like they want to kill themselves, they're not joking, they are 100% in that moment really struggling. And I can see how from the outside people being like that could look kind of attention seeking, or that they need, you know, attention from people in that situation. but people with BPD, it's so opposite to that. It's like it's a cry for help. It's like, I feel like this, come and... I would say it's wanting the feeling of all of these emotions and all of this constant changing emotion. They just want to put a stop to that and just be able to, you know, have a normal life that's nice and chilled out and has little ups and downs, but mostly level. Whereas people with BPD are up and down constantly, so it's really hard to not get really upset about that. And obviously if you're more depressed or on the suicidal sort of, you get suicidal feelings, then that's going to be even harder for you than, you know, normally. Next we've got extreme emotional swings, which is basically goes hand in hand with all of the things above. Say you are sat and you are having a nice cup of tea and you're kind of chilling out watching TV and you're just really calm, and then all of a sudden you just switch. You find that boring, you want to go out, you want to go do something, you've got so much energy, you really like almost go manic, and you have to do things and you're really excitable, and then another switch goes and you're really angry, and maybe someone said something and triggered you, or, you know, it's constant shifting of emotions, so it's really, really horrible. But the other thing is that the extreme emotional swings mean that when you have a high, when you're really happy, it's like nothing you've ever felt before, because it's just so amazing. Like, you're, you know, I don't know how to describe it. It's just like, that's the only sort of good things from it, is that when you are having really good times, they are amazing and they feel incredible. So there's always a plus side to, you know, the negative. But it also says like things that people often find easy to sort of shrug off, people with BPD would really struggle to kind of forget about it. So say someone said something to upset you, or they've not meant it but they've upset you, that would stick with you, and that could cause the triggers itself and actually make you go up and down in mood. So explosive anger's another one. I don't personally get explosive anger. I used to. I've only been like explosively angry about twice in my life, and I regret it massively. I've hit people, and there's no excuse for that. I'm a pacifist now. I would never ever imagine hitting someone, and it's horrible. But people with BPD, obviously, if you have an emotion, it is so strong. Sometimes you can't, you know, you can't think about it quick enough before you act. So that's the real struggle. If you are someone with anger issues with BPD, it must be incredibly hard if people upset you. I've met a few people with anger problems that have BPD that are quite scary, and I think that's where the line gets a bit blurry between people finding people with BPD quite scary, like in movies and stuff, because they often try and make them out to be like the murderer, or people in the news like beating people up, which, you know, that happens in every type of societal group. So I don't think it can be narrowed down to just having BPD. I think it's a personality thing. I think it's lots of different factors, whether the person has actually, you know, tried to hit you first. There's lots of different variants, so I think the negative stereotype of people with BPD is actually quite wrong now. I've met some of the most kind, quiet people you would never ever think to have BPD, that have very, very normal lives and cope extremely well and have their whole lives, because BPD has been recognised quite recently. And for those people, they've grown up not understanding and not having that help through therapy. So I'm incredibly lucky to be living in the time that I am, and with the help and the research that now exists with BPD. The last one is feeling suspicious or out of touch with reality. So this kind of goes with dissociation as well. Dissociation's kind of when you can sort of, it's almost like a dream state. You can kind of click out of reality, and you can kind of go a bit, you know, like you're gone for a minute. The dissociation part kind of clicks in and calms that down so that you go into this kind of dreamy, chilled out space so that you don't struggle with a situation so much. It's like your brain's seatbelt. It's trying to help you out. But feeling out of touch with reality is massively relatable to me. I really struggle to relate to other people quite a lot, like not empathetically, like I do understand emotions and feelings and how people are thinking and all of that. It's just when you have BPD, it's hard not to feel different to other people that are normal. I hate that word, but you know. So I would say, talking about out of touch with reality, I would say that I get quite paranoid with certain things. Sometimes if I'm very stressed out, I can be paranoid about what I think someone's thinking or feeling towards me. I can often play up in my brain that people hate me, or you know, so I just don't talk to people. You know, it's sometimes really, really difficult. Like I've massively struggled with friendships and relationships in the past. Luckily at the moment I have a very stable, loving boyfriend who understands my mental health issues and my physical health issues so well. He's so lovely and listens to everything I say, so he understands my triggers and doesn't play up to it, does not, you know, I've had boyfriends in the past that were aware of, and friends that were aware of certain triggers and certain issues, and you have to be incredibly careful with who you give the knowledge about your issues to. Realising that I'm talking to a camera about this. Anyway, yeah, but the difference is I'm at a level with my BPD where I've had therapy. So a lot of the things that used to bother me don't anymore. Like maybe they do on an off day, but I can't often be triggered by things, so this is why I'm talking about it. I would just be really careful about who you tell and how much you tell to them, because people can use it against you. There are manipulative people out there and they can use stuff against you, so just be incredibly careful. Yeah, so that's the 9 different traits of borderline personality disorder. If you want to be if you relate to any of that and you think that might be what you have going on, just go to the doctors, talk about the symptoms you're feeling, maybe talk about borderline personality disorder, and they can refer you to a psychologist to actually have an assessment. You can get your formal diagnosis from, you know, a trained professional. You can't just say that you have it, you have to go and get a diagnosis from a psychiatrist. So definitely get in touch with any local mental health teams you have, look into that. So yeah, obviously if you have any questions towards BPD or any of that, you can message me and ask. Completely open to answering any questions or making another video about a specific thing that bothers people with BPD if you want. So I wanted to talk about fibromyalgia now. So fibromyalgia is quite a confusing medical mystery. They still don't know an awful lot about it, so I'll tell you what I know or what I understand. So obviously I'm not a professional, I'm only talking from my experience. So for me, fibromyalgia is well, in general, it's pain that is there but isn't there also. So this is a really hard thing for people to grasp quite a lot of the time, but it's basically the signals from my brain are picking up pain when there isn't any there. So what I'm feeling is really painful and is there in the sense that I'm feeling it, but there's no actual source to the pain. So I feel like my joints swell up and they're very sore, but I've been tested for things like arthritis or autoimmune disorders, things, you know, that could cause flares in pain or, you know, joints, anything like that. So I've been tested and don't have that. So they've given me the diagnosis of fibromyalgia. That was a rheumatologist, so it's a professional opinion. So basically what fibromyalgia is yeah, lots of pain, but not really any cause for it, which is very annoying, and there's often not a lot you can do about it because it's not been researched very well, or to an extent where we have answers. People are often put on lots of pain medication, are told to do lots of unhelpful things that actually make it a lot worse for a lot of people, like exercise. Often people jump to the conclusion that it's your diet and exercise. Yes, those have a contributing factor to you just feeling well in general, but exercise for people with fibromyalgia can often trigger it. So for me, if I do a lot of walking, or I used to go to the gym, I would then suffer for a good sort of 2-3 days afterwards and be stuck in bed. The other thing about fibromyalgia is that you can go from appearing very well to other people, be very chatty, you know, not have a lot of pain that day, maybe not be having a flare-up. They call it flare-ups because it kind of goes up and down, and that's the problem with having BPD and fibro, is the two don't go very well together. So with fibro, my personal experience is that I have had pain in my joints for years. I have had extremely uncomfortable feelings in my legs, sensations like crawling. I get pins and needles if I sit down for too long. I've got pins and needles right now. So I often have to take breaks when I record, stand up and walk around. I also struggle with something called fibro fog. So a lot of people think that fibro fog is just like forgetting, like being forgetful and things like that, but it's actually really distressing. I can often forget where I'm going partway through walking somewhere. I can not remember what I'm trying to talk about in a conversation, which is incredibly distressing when you're just trying to have a normal conversation with someone and someone is trying to like finish your sentence for you. It's extremely patronising. Well, I find it extremely patronising. And I often feel like people don't really know what I'm talking about because I struggle to communicate when I'm really ill or I'm having a flare-up. Obviously today I'm fine and I can talk normally, I can get out my words and can communicate very well. So it's often quite difficult for people when they see you flip to having a flare, because I can go from being extremely, you know, I can move. Yesterday and the day before, actually yesterday I was fine, the day before I had a really bad day and couldn't get out of bed until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So because it's so up and down, it's quite distressing, because if you try to make any plans, it is incredibly difficult to stick to them, because say you have a flare-up and you've just said to people that you're going to go to an event or, you know, do something that's physical and then you can't, it's quite distressing for both people, you know, the person you said you go and visit or spend the day with, and you, because you have to just stay in bed and not do anything. I really don't like having fibro. It has completely, in my opinion, taken away my youth. I used to be an incredibly like active young girl. I'd go to skate park and run around, and you know, I loved doing exercise, rounders at school, running around, like loved exercise, loved doing PE, trampolining, all of that kind of stuff. And then as I've gotten older, I've always been quite a healthy weight, been very comfortable with what I look like, and then as I came into my teenage years, really struggled, like late teenage years towards my 20s, I started noticing my body kind of decreasing in energy. I was really struggling to get up for school/college. I was forgetting really normal things. I was, you know, there's so many different parts of it that kind of start to appear, but if you're already forgetful, you're going to forget about the thing that you should remember to tell someone. So if that makes any sense. So for me, trying to even get people to notice when those things were happening was difficult, because I would forget what I was trying to say to them, or couldn't, in the moment where it was happening, couldn't communicate it well enough to get someone to notice or understand it to a point where they would help. I'm going to look up fibromyalgia and just make sure that I'm not missing anything, because even though I'm having a good day, I don't want to forget anything. So I'm going to look at the NHS website because they have often, you know, the best information and the most reliable in the UK. So I'm just looking at the symptoms. Fibromyalgia has many symptoms that tend to vary from person to person. The main symptom is widespread pain, which is what I've just been talking about. Obviously, everyone with fibro will experience it differently. Some people might actually be in a wheelchair, and some people may never need, you know, walking aids, and may be very active people. So there's a massive spectrum of people with fibro. So it says there may be periods where your symptoms may worsen or get better dependent on factors such as your stress levels, changes in weather, how physically active you are. So yeah, like I said, with the exercise it can really give me a flare-up. Changes in weather is another thing that really bothers my body. So the changes in heat to cold is extremely uncomfortable for me. At the moment in the UK we are having, well, we're just in autumn now, so we're going from having quite a hot summer to rainy cold days, which is extremely painful for people with fibro, or some people with fibro really struggle with that. I've also found a correlation between my stress level and my fibro, so if I'm really stressed about an upcoming event, it can often kind of self-sabotage in a way, because it can manifest and then become a bad flare-up. So it's really difficult cycle sometimes. It is really difficult to cope with. So it says widespread pain. So these are the different things. So people experience things like aching, burning, up their spine, up their back, all over your body. Sharp stabbing pains. There's so many different things, so you can look up all of the different types of pain that people feel. There are lots of videos, lots of YouTube videos. There's an incredible community of people on Instagram with fibromyalgia or chronic illness in general. Extreme sensitivity. So how I would describe my experience of this is that some days I can poke my skin like this, absolutely normal, and then other days I could touch it like this and it feels like someone has punched me or pressed me with a hot poker. So this is such a strange thing for me, because sometimes I can even sit on a chair that's a little bit too firm and it can hurt the bottoms of my legs like I'm bruised. So if you've ever had a bruise and accidentally kind of poked it on something, that pain is what it can be like all over your body. So it's super uncomfortable, but obviously it's really difficult to cope with, because if you know that that's not actually happening to your body, trying to justify that to other people is incredibly hard. I've had a lot of people that don't actually understand or believe fibromyalgia exists, which, you know, doctors say it does, so, and rheumatologists do, so we will go with them, I would say. So it's called I cannot pronounce this, hyperalgesia? I don't know. When you're extremely sensitive to pain. And allodynia, when you feel pain from something that should not be painful at all, such as a very light touch. So that was what I was just talking about. Another symptom is stiffness. I've spoken about that as well briefly, but it can feel, that's why a lot of people with fibro go down the arthritis lane, because you kind of, they have similar symptoms. So we thought that for a while, but that was ruled out with a blood test. They can find out whether you have, I think it's your, oh come on memory, I'm searching. Another symptom is fatigue. This is something I really struggle with. So the fatigue is extreme tiredness, but I don't really think that justifies what it is. Because I do remember being quite young and not having fibro. Some people have it their whole lives, some people develop it. Fatigue for me is like, imagine you've ran a lot you know, you've done a lot of running, done a lot of weights, done a lot of exercise, then you don't sleep for a few days. That is how fatigue feels for me. So some days you wake up, even after you've slept 9 hours, you feel like you have not slept in a year. It's awful. And it also feels a little bit like flu, if you've ever had the pleasure of having flu. I had flu when I was younger, and honestly it's the worst feeling in, you know, since fibro. That is the worst experience I've ever had with an illness. So you feel achy, you feel tired, you can't really focus on things, you just feel rubbish, and that is the closest thing I can get to fibro for people that have not experienced it before. So the other thing with you know, having the fatigue is it can come on quite suddenly. So if I go shopping to just do a food shop, I can get round half the shop and then it can start to set in, and I can find it extremely difficult to finish my shopping, remember what I meant to be getting. So I have to do a lot of pre-planning, a lot of, you know, pre-planning goes into everything I do just to actually try and get out the house and be sociable in any sense. Cognitive problems such as fibro fog I've already touched on. Trouble remembering, learning new things. Learning new things is really tricky, because when I went to go to uni when I was at college, started to really struggle with my BPD and didn't realise I had fibro at the time. Trying to apply for uni or even look to a future is incredibly difficult when you have fibro, because just trying to remember things you've been taught in a day is incredibly difficult. It's like you've got to do double the work just to remember something incredibly simple, and there's lots of ways around this, like memory prompts, and you know, everyone learns in different ways. I'm more of a visual learner, so like cards and things like that. But it basically put my complete journey to uni on hold. I've not gone to uni, I had to quit. I have had to quit multiple jobs because of my fibro, because it flares up so randomly. Obviously an employer doesn't want someone that one day is incredible at their job and the next day can't get out of bed. That's something that's been really difficult. I feel like my whole teenage and adult life has kind of been ripped from my grasp, and I feel like a lot of people with fibro feel like that. It feels incredibly uncomfortable and annoying that happens to you, but you get on with it, you know, you've got to get on with it. I'm finding ways around it. I'm getting back into work and I'm getting back into socialising, and hopefully moving out soon. So, you know, the things that have been put on hold for me because of my illnesses, I've kind of gotten over the shock of having them and the kind of depression stage of the realisation of your life will change completely. And after you get over, or somewhat get over, that kind of realisation, you can start putting plans in place and getting the help that you need. So if you go to uni, you can tell them that you struggle with things like that. Maybe you could get a helper or someone that goes through your homework with you, or, you know, extra time to do work, things like that. You know, there is help out there for you if you have things like this. People struggle with headaches. You may suffer with stiffness in your neck, shoulders. This is something that I really struggle with. I get a lot of stiffness around my neck and the top of my back, even to the point where I get out of the shower, I'm doing my makeup, I have to kind of sit up against a wall and do a lot of, my back just clicked, that was horrible, sit up against a wall just to support my back and things. I get a lot of headaches and soreness around this kind of area, especially when I'm stressed out. And I know a lot of people with fibro that have really bad chronic headaches or migraines, which is awful. If you look into migraines, they are horrible. A lot of people suffer with irritable bowel syndrome, IBS. I would say when I was younger I used to really struggle with this, but since turning vegan I've not had any trouble at all with my digestion or anything like that. So maybe if you are someone with fibro and you want to just try something else out, maybe try veganism or plant-based diet, you know, if you just want to see if it helps you. It might not, it might just be complete coincidence that I'm eating healthier and that, you know, but who knows, but it definitely helped me. Other things that people struggle or relate to: dizziness, clumsiness, feeling too hot or cold. Oh, body temperature and regulation is awful. Oh, some days I get so hot I just have to like sit in my pants, especially in the summer, and just put like a fan on me, and it is unbearable because you cannot cool yourself down. I also don't sweat very much, so you can imagine in summer what it's like to be extremely hot and not sweat. That is the body's way of cooling us down. So yeah, I often don't sweat very much, so all of that heat is just like in me and it's really unbearable, so I have to use a lot of ice packs. But the good thing about summer is that my joints don't hurt quite so much. So it says the overwhelming urge to move your legs, so restless leg syndrome. I get that at night sometimes. I get it less now I'm on Slimming World and I've lost weight. I can do another video on like fibro and weight loss or like health in general, because I don't really like the term weight loss that much. I don't really like focusing on that. It's more health orientated. So since I've lost weight, there's less weight on my joints, so I feel healthier. So that's the kind of angle I'm doing it from. Tingling, numbness, prickling, burning sensations in your hands, feet. Yeah, I get that all up here, and sometimes it's really hard to sleep or focus. Anxiety and depression. So this is what I was saying at the beginning of the video, where the kind of BPD, fibro, depression, anxiety all link up. So yeah, they kind of all interact with each other in a way. They kind of all blend in. So if I'm having a really bad pain day, I can often get depression or get extremely low because I'm depressed about being stuck in my room, not being able to go outside, being in pain in general, and then also having to face the stigma of people not understanding. So there's a lot going on there. But yeah, if I'm having a good mental health day and I have pain, it's a lot easier to deal with because I do things like self-care. I'm more, you know, I have more motivation to try and get myself out of that. I'm a bit kinder to myself as well, because I think being kind to yourself with fibro is so important, or any mental health or invisible chronic illness, whatever. You have to be kind to yourself. Apparently women usually have more painful periods. I don't have periods anymore. I've been taking the pill for a while because I was having incredibly painful periods and quite heavy periods, and that was, you know, I was going home from school when I was younger because my periods were that bad. Staying off school. You should never have to stay off school because of a health issue. It's not fair. So that kind of interrupts the whole socialising and everything like that as well. Depression. In some cases, having this condition can lead to depression. I'm always wondering whether, you know, my depression and anxiety came from fibro and me not realising for a long time. Because I would see people being really active and be like, how are people like this? How do people do this much in a day? I often recall when I was about 15 or even younger, I think about 13, I would have my friends come to the house. They would pick me up on the way to school. We'd all walk together. And I would always be that kid that was always late, always rushing, always like straightening my hair just as I'm going out the door. And now I realise I had fatigue. I was, you know, I had an actual issue. People used to think I was just really lazy. So did I. And I think there's a lot of internalised, is it oppression? No. Internalised just hatred towards yourself when you know, I was saying to myself, well, why can't you get out? Why can't you do this? Why can't you do things like, you know, normal people your age? And at some point you have to realise that you're not like people your age and that you do have to be kinder to yourself. Maybe get a bit more extra help than others around you. And for me, I've always been incredibly independent in the sense of my personality and how I think and feel about the world. So to have to ask for help for me was incredibly difficult, and I can understand for a lot of people that is hard. especially if you were well or considered well before you got the diagnosis of whatever you've got. So yeah, that is everything I want to talk about. So they're my two most prominent invisible illnesses. I have an invisible illness drawing account where I draw people on Instagram, or draw about a certain, you know, mental health issue or invisible chronic illness or whatever it is, called Invisibly Fragile. If you want to go check that out, I can link it below. I'm very new to drawing, so please don't judge, you know. Took a big break from college, so please don't judge me. But it's more of a fun pastime and a way to kind of connect with the community of other people that have fibro or BPD or whatever you're suffering with. But just know that you're not alone, and there are many people out there with invisible illness that will support you and love you no matter what. So even if other people around you do not understand, that doesn't mean that nobody will. So that's why I kind of wanted to talk about it today, because I feel like after watching that Crude Vegan video, so many of those people were just being so genuine, honest and open. It just warmed my heart so much that there were people out there that understood. And I feel like we are often forgotten people with fibro, because if we can't go outside, the socialisation of our lives kind of goes out the window. I've lost a lot of friends since having fibro and BPD. People don't really, you know, it's quite difficult for people to understand it and get on board, and they think, oh, you're well one day and then you're not, and it's incredibly hard. But just imagine what it's like for the people that suffer with it sometimes as well. But luckily I've met some new friends that are incredibly accepting of my fibro or understand it because they have similar things. So just know that there are people out there for you that will support you and understand you in every way. I hope this was helpful in any way, shape or form. I just wanted to talk about it and be a bit more open about it, because I talk about it a lot on my personal Instagram, but I haven't had the space to kind of do that here. I've done mental health video before on here, but it kind of felt out of place without the name being changed. So now I've changed the name, I can broaden my horizon of what I talk about on YouTube. So I hope you enjoyed that, or I hope you learned something in general. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask, or, you know, find me on Instagram on VegetalianKatie. Yeah, hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much. I'm imagining this is the subscribe button, this is the new video, or this can be the new video, and this can be subscribe. Sorry, I'm weird.